Hello, my name is Sylvester Henderson, as many of you know, and I am the CEO of Professor for Life Incorporated. And I am so grateful to have a wonderful guest that I've known for some time, Dr. Ricky Shabazz. He is the president of San Diego City College, and I'm honored to have him on our podcast this morning. Welcome, Dr. Shabazz.
Well, thank you. The honor is all mine. And when you say you've known me for some time, you definitely know me since I was in college, freshman in college. Shoot, we going back, 20 plus years. So it is all the honor is mine to be able to be on your platform and share my journey and share the mentorship that I've benefited from you as well.
Thank you. Dr. Shabazz, could you introduce yourself to our digital media academic world? Tell us where you went to college, about your academic journey coming up as a young man.
Absolutely. Ricky Shabazz, honor and privilege to be the president of San Diego City College, fifth oldest community college in the state, one of the oldest community colleges in the country, certainly one of the most diverse community colleges, being a border town or border city, the eighth largest city in the country. And I get to go to work every day and say, how the heck did this happen? And the question about how I got my start, really, I'm the child of a teenage parent. My mother had me when she was about 15 and a half. I was the first person in my family to go to college, first gain exposure to a community college through Pasadena City College. So I grew up in Pasadena, went to Pasadena High School. It was fascinating that my high school counselor, because of the closeness in age to my mother, my high school counselor was actually my mother's high school counselor. And so she remembered vividly my mother carrying me. And so she invested a lot in me. Father was in the Marine Corps. He was in and out of my life. My parents grew up in the latter 70s, latter 70s, 80s. And so they fell subject to, the crack cocaine epidemic. And so my mom and father at some point or another was on crack. Dad dibbled and dabbled in selling it. And so, unfortunately, he was in and out of prison. Mom was in and off of drugs. But even though, they're functioning drug addicts, if there's such a thing. So they always had jobs, was raised mostly by my grandparents, meaning I thought it was normal for me to live with my mom and my grandparents. Went to UC Davis, had a heck of an experience there, so much of an experience that they hired me straight out of college. Was one of the youngest administrators in the University of California, did that for about 6 years, the assistant director of admissions. And that really set me on a course. My leadership as a high school student, middle school student, was always involved in leadership. That included college. And so I like to tell people I've always been a leader. Long before I had a title or I had a job, I was absolutely a leader. So went to UC Davis, got hired in admissions, sent back to Southern California. So I went up to all the high schools. You and I met because my best friend when I was at UC Davis, John DeCure, went to UC Berkeley. It was I remember vividly, he was one of the first people to be able to take the piano away from you. And at the time, I didn't understand why that was a big thing. Certainly with the piano behind you, I didn't know that it was a big thing for John to be able to get on that piano as a freshman. And that had the chance to meet you when I was a freshman at UC Davis and John was a freshman at UC Berkeley. I came down to a couple of your gospel events at UC Berkeley, had a great time, had a great college experience, so much so that I worked for UC Davis for about 6 years and then took a job at Compton College. And people thought I was crazy to leave the University of California to go to a community college. But frankly, I wanted to work with Black and Latino students, first generation students. I wanted to work with students who came from similar communities that I did. And that's not to say that the University of California doesn't have those students. We know they do, but they certainly don't have them at the level that community colleges offer access to 100% of the people who apply. And so took a job at Compton Community College when it lost its accreditation, was able to join Dr. Keith Curry in building a team that grew Compton from approximately 3,000 students to 15,000 students. And when you do that during a time when a college lost its accreditation, you begin to make a name for yourself. And so from Compton was the dean of students, would go on to be the vice president of students at San Bernardino Valley College. And someone saw enough in me, thought enough of me, that I went to a number of training programs, always been committed to my professional development. And so went through the Los Angeles Community College District President's Academy and a program called the Thomas Lakin Institute, which is a national preparation for Black community college presidents, and became one of the first presidents out of both of those programs at the current college that I'm at. And so what I like to say is that I'm a product of great teaching, and I'm a product of even better mentorship. Throughout my life, I've just had mentorship. From a spiritual standpoint, I would say God has sent me angels that have led me on the right path. And for the most part, I listened. I didn't always listen. Sometimes I bucked and kicked and fought. But for the most part, I listened and was able to, first time applying to be a college president, was selected, gained the opportunity to serve as the president at San Diego City College, the most amazing place that I've ever worked in my life. Well, that's the quick version of a long story.
Okay. One of the things that's really profound to me is your kindness and your heart as it relates to individuals who come from challenged backgrounds. And that is really I think the real true work of equity. Can you please describe your work and obligations as the president of San Diego City College? How you interface with faculty and how you offer them effective support and guidance and fulfill all of your roles to your large district and all of those wonderful tasks.
Yeah. I like to tell people that the most important thing I do as a college president is hire people. That could be faculty, that could be supervisors, that could be administrators. I've been very fortunate in this post-pandemic world, if there's such a thing, to be able to hire over 100 people. When I was the vice president, I hired over 100 people. And so it's been great to see some of the people who I hired, whether they're faculty that go on to be deans, whether they're deans that go on to be vice presidents. I now have former vice presidents that are presidents of a college. And so as the president of my college, I am the chief officer in making sure that the college meets its obligations, meets our mission and our vision, setting the tone for how we support students, how we support our colleagues. So I do a lot of work with professional development. I do a lot of work with the community, because the first word in community colleges is in fact community. So sitting on boards, really setting the tone and the pace and the support and the narrative for how we accomplish our mission to serve 100% of the people who walk through the doors. Could be first generation, could be formerly military, could be justice impacted. I mean, I could go down the list. Immigrants, people who maybe lost their jobs. I mean, that's the beauty for me as a community college, is as a president, I get to identify resources and interventions to help people who are coming to us to access the middle class and beyond. That takes a lot of team building. I do a lot of professional development with our managers, with our faculty. That takes developing partnerships with people outside of the college, because we know our colleges don't have enough resources. Community colleges receive the least per student of any segment of higher education in the state, to include significantly less than our prisons. And so another thing that I must do, enjoy doing, is raising funds, whether it be for scholarships, assisting with grants or partnerships, so that we remove the barriers. We're working to support students in their basic needs. And fortunately, I'm at a college that is unapologetically in support of all students who walk through the door. So those are some of the things I do as a president. But I would say, if I was asked the number one thing, the most important thing I do as a college president is hire the people who get to work with our students every day.
Wow, thank you. Can you please share information about your work as social advocate administrator for students of color? What are some of the tasks in terms of the community and throughout not only your campus, but the state of California that you do to support primarily just the students?
Yeah, the interesting thing is when I became a president, and I haven't gotten this question in a while, but certainly the first year I was a president, the number one question I would receive is, what is it like being a black president? And my standard answer to that question is, I don't know, because I haven't been anything else. And so I lead, I lead with my passion to serve the underserved. I could talk about opening one of the first Dreamers Resource Centers in the country that is now funded by the state. And that happened because I attended a MECHA meeting, which is a program for our Latino students. And two of our undocumented Latino students talked about being taken advantage of in the community by people portraying themselves as lawyers. And they had paid these folks thousands of dollars to do work that the college already does. And so a lot of what I do, frankly, is for all students. And that is setting up spaces where students know that they're going to interact with someone who either looks like them, understands them, or comes from a similar background as them. And I'll give an example. At City College, we have a lot of Black immigrants. They could be Somali, they could be from Haiti. So I remember on campus running into a Haitian one day, and he was very frustrated because his English just wasn't good. He was an immigrant. And he was frustrated. I could tell, you can tell when somebody's frustrated. And so I said, hey, where are you from? And he says, oh, I'm from Haiti. I said, well, do you speak French Creole? Yes. I was able to walk him to an employee who's Haitian and is fluent in French Creole. And you could see literally the weight of the world lifted off of this gentleman's shoulders, where he has someone who understood his language, understood his culture, and then we can begin the process of helping him navigate our system. We got to realize in California, and I would say in the United States, that community colleges are largely an American thing. And so when you work with immigrants, when you work with people from other places, they may not understand our systems. And that's for all students. You could be a first generation student. You could be a student coming out of the military. A lot of what I do is try to present interventions that help people not only navigate our systems, but in some case dismantle them, in some case master them, so that we can remove the barriers for students who are either coming to us to enter the workforce and or coming to us to transfer to a four-year college. And so to answer your question, a lot of what I've done is create cohort programs, learning programs for first generation students, for Latino students, for Black students. We're piloting right now an intervention for our Asian Pacific Islander students. In San Diego, we have a large population of Filipinos. And so we're really, I call it the Cheers syndrome. You ever watch the TV show Cheers, where you walk Absolutely. In and everybody knows your name? We're trying to create these spaces, and one of which that is near and dear to me. We just passed a $3.7 billion bond a couple of weeks ago. One of the things we're going to build is a parent center. And the parent center is going to be set up because most of our students have children, and daycare is expensive, and we want to remove the barriers that would keep a student from completing their education. So what we're going to do is similar to like a 24-hour fitness, where you could bring your child to school, drop them off while you're going to class, have somebody watch them, or have a place where you can go and study or see a counselor that is child friendly, because a lot of our colleges are not child friendly. So those are just some of the examples of what we like to call, from a research standpoint, because I do have a doctorate, it is an intervention that helps meet students where they are and assist them to get to where they want to go.
Wow. You know what? Those tasks and those wonderful goals are wonderful in terms of how you are implementing programs to not only help students, but just the community at large. How does your management style fulfill the goal and principles of the California Master Plan for Higher Education?
Well, I've been a chief advocator for changing and dismantling the California Master Plan.
Okay.
This notion that stratifies education in California as to what the UCs can or cannot offer, what the CSUs can or cannot offer, and or what the community colleges can or cannot offer. And I didn't know going into this. I got to give credit to Dr. Ed Bush, who really, probably about 20 years ago, 15 years ago, really, I sat in a presentation that he did about the California master plan. And he's a working student at UC Davis, going to classes in Kerr Hall. UC Berkeley's got Kerr Hall. And then as I started to learn the California master plan, first chancellor or president of the University of California, writing that document, I would find myself in the second cohort at a CSU offering a doctorate, which originally the master plan wouldn't allow that. And now we see the CSUs working to be able to offer additional doctorates, which means they're challenging the UCs. And here we are at a community college. I just went through offering a bachelor's degree in cybersecurity and had to fight the CSU, and successfully was able to offer. We got our first cohort of over 40 students that are taking cybersecurity. And so my leadership is really dismantling these systems that are inherently racist, whether they were set up intentionally or unintentionally. The community colleges, by way of the educational master plan, was only supposed to help the working class, trades, and that sort of thing. And now we know, with the cost of education rising, with CSUs and UCs being harder to gain access, particularly for Black, Latino, and first generation students, my leadership must be used to allow community colleges to offer more bachelor's degrees. We just lost the fight to be able to offer nursing. My college has one of the best nursing programs in the state, and certainly nationally. I think we're ranked number 2 in the state, number 3 in the nation for associate's degree of nursing. And there isn't any reason why we shouldn't be able to offer a BSN with the need for nursings in the state, or nurses in the state and nationally. So that just gives you an idea of the political activism that I'm typically involved in, and my leadership.
You know what? I am, I am so glad to hear you talk about that. Having had the opportunity through my career in working in all the segments of higher education in California,
literally,
I literally have, the CSU, the UC system, and the community college. Yeah. And so, what, I've understood that what you said is so profound, and I want to commend you for having the wisdom to understand that people don't want to say it, but it is prejudice the way they've set it up. Because what happens
elitism, right? And elitism.
That's right. And because what it says is, and when I worked on the Academic Senate, I was part of the Intersegmental Council for Academic Senates. And I used to always watch. Now, I never personally had that challenge because I had so many connections in the other systems. But I would notice how when you go to like a joint meeting or so, when you're from the UC system, or primarily the UC system, people would really focus. It's like, wow, the gods have spoken. But when you're from the community college, it's kind of like a pat on the back. It's like, these are not real educators. What?
These little folks over there. Right?
That's right. But a lot of people I don't think they see the subtle prejudice. I'm not saying it's intentional or unintentional, because I had wonderful times and challenges working in the UC system. I started teaching originally as a 23-year-old man, and I'm 64, in the California State University of San Francisco State. So I'm really glad to hear that your political activism is trying to find a way to, as you call it, dismantle some of the prejudices, but at the same time to bring more value and to show the state and leaders that the community college is equal in its offerings, equal in its instructional acumen, as well as being equal professionally. So having said that, who really influenced you to become a prominent college professor? Who was the one that gave you that great bug, or was it something that just kind of evolved?
I wish I could give you one name because there's been so many. And in no particular order, the woman who admitted me into UC Davis was someone who played a big role in my life, and I say admitted me because I would go on and get hired by the admissions office. And as I was looking into my file, Leslie Campbell, who God rest her soul, was an amazing advocate for all students, but certainly for Black students. She gave me my first job. And not only did she give me my first job, but it was a job that someone at 22 years old should not have had. And she made sure I was prepared for the interview. She didn't give me any questions or anything like that, but she sent people to me with books and I would say breadcrumbs, right? She left a path for me to follow if I was willing to do the work. And so I would say Leslie Campbell would be one of many. And one of the things she taught me that I still use today, and that I mentor hundreds of people, countless, in fact. And one of the things she taught me early on, she said, Ricky, if you have to tell people who you are, you're not who you think you are. Like, I remember that like it was yesterday as a 22, 23-year-old young man who had this title that was bigger than I was. And she said, look, if you do the work, people will recognize you for the work that you do. You don't need to go around telling people who you are. And consequently today, I don't call myself the president. I don't call myself Dr. Shabazz, but certainly I am those things. And the question that I love the most, the students come up to me and they say, hey, I hear you're the president. And my normal response is, yeah, that's what they say. But to get back to your question, Leslie Campbell is one of those. Dr. Keith Curry, the president of Compton College, Ed Bush. I will also say this, and I think it's important. I heard Dr. Michael Eric Dyson about a month or so ago in a tweet or something say he issued an open love letter to Black women. And as I look back at my career, most of my mentors have been Black women. And so the first person who hired me as a vice president was a Black woman. And she asked me this question that was entirely inappropriate, but I understood why she asked the question afterwards. I was done with my interview, my last interview. This was the president of the college, a Black woman. I was applying to be the vice president of students. And her last question to me, Professor Henderson, was, do you have a problem working with Black women? Now that was entirely inappropriate, broke every HR rule probably known to man. And I thought about it. And once I got over that, I thought it was inappropriate. My answer was, my wife's a Black woman. My mom was a Black woman. My grandmothers are Black women. No, I've been working for Black women all my life. I don't got a problem working with a Black woman. Now, once I got hired, I understood the plight of a Black woman that was very different than the plight of a Black man, and not to compete one against the other, but it's just different. So I understood why she asked that. But to answer your question again, most of my mentors have been Black women, but I would be remiss if I didn't identify the Black men like yourself who mentored me from afar. Some of your mentors mentor you directly. Some of them mentor you indirectly. I mean, I consider you to be a mentor. The first time I met you as a 19-year-old, who would know, over 20 years later, our paths would cross. And so I've had so many people who have poured into my life that we don't even have time for me to thank all of them.
Well, you know what? It is really nice to see young men such as yourself become so successful, and to go back and pass it forward to the community, give back to the community, and to not only give to the community, but to give specifically for African American males who have great challenges, as well as to respect the challenges and values and struggles of the African American female. Having said that, can you describe some of your research ideas and how you're finding support students of colors?
Yeah, so My research expertise is on case studies, which means I look for successful models and then try to tweak them to apply to the environment I'm in, right? And so a lot of times we look at things from a deficit standpoint, like what's not working. I like to study what is working and then try to tweak what is working to the environment that I'm in. And so you heard me talk about learning communities. We know that they work. We know cohort models work. We know that a lot of our Black and brown students have never had a Black or brown teacher. So we put them in a class, a cohort with Black and brown teachers so that they can see this is real. And not only do we let them see that it's real, you see, I don't have a suit and a tie on. Certainly, I do have a number of nice suits and a number of nice ties. But we also try to encourage students to be their authentic self. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I realize that people need to code switch. I've been very fortunate that I've been able to be unapologetically Black in every environment that I've been in. Now, understand, I must say, because I don't want anybody to take that out of context, that being unapologetically Black doesn't mean that I'm anti anything else. If you look at my body of work in terms of supporting all students on campus, I would put my track record up against anyone. But we know that across the board at any college you go to, typically Black students, brown students, first generation students are going to be the lowest performers. And if we can find interventions, largely learning communities, cohort models, that will increase their success, I know that those same interventions will help all students. And so that really has been the approach to try to increase the number of students, mentorship. I mean, all that we know how to increase the success of Black students. We know how to increase the success of Latino students, first generations. We know how to do this. And we also know that it's costly. We also know that it comes at a cost. And I remember Ed Bush saying one time, if you follow the finances of a college, you'll see what's important to them. I would invite anyone to follow the finances of San Diego City College, and you'll see what is important to our college, to include something that I meant to say earlier. I'm going to take an opportunity to say it now. We just opened a barber shop. And it's been the dopest thing I've ever done on my campus. And you may think, well, why is there a barber shop on the campus? Well, we were looking at our data and the number of Black and Latino males that were going to financial aid or admissions or the transfer center. These offices we know students need to go to. And historically, culturally, and otherwise, sometimes we have too much pride to ask for help. But we know the role that a barber plays in the Black community, the Latino community, in advising and counseling. And so we put mental health counselors in the barbershop. And we know, Sylvester, when you sit in that barber chair, I got you for 45 minutes. You're not going anywhere. And so now we're doing group counseling. We're doing resume writing. We're doing headshots for resumes. We're doing all these things that our Black and Latino males typically wouldn't interface with, and they're doing it now because of the barbershop. Now, before somebody listening asks me, well, what about the women? If you got short hair and need a fade, you can go to the barbershop, and they do not turn anyone away. And the last thing I'll say about the barbershop is we're still learning. We opened it in April. We've had a number of colleges come visit us. I want to tell two stories real quick, actually, about the barbershop. The first student to get a haircut was an unhoused, homeless veteran who hadn't had a haircut in 3 months and was going on a job interview. He got out of that chair and said, I feel seen for the first time in 3 months. He shot me an email the week after and to thank me and the vice president of students, Marciano Perez, and said, I got the job. And I got the job because of that haircut. And it wasn't just the haircut; it was the career counseling he's got while he was in that seat. It was the learning about the resume workshops that he got while he was in that seat. All the things that we need to feed students so that they can be successful, he got because he sat down in that seat and got up with a brand new haircut. The other thing I'll say, the second story I'll tell about the barbershop that we're still trying to learn about, is we started having female students show up not to get a haircut, to get their children a haircut. And we had a donor sponsor. We just started this. We have a donor now. Once a month, we do haircuts for the children of our students. We have a Cal Works program, which is a welfare to work program. We now give haircuts to those students. And what our students are telling us, because in San Diego, Professor Henderson, a haircut's like $40 to $50.
That's right.
And so these students are telling us that I can take the money that I'm saving for not having to pay for a haircut and go buy groceries, help pay my rent, pay for gas. So those are some of the things that we do. It's innovative because colleges are not doing, but it's a no-brainer for those of us who really know the role some of these services play in our community.
I want to thank you for describing that creative accomplishment. There's a gentleman by the name of Dr. Jonathan Locas, who's like an academic son, I call him to myself. He's down, I believe, he was vice president of instruction at Winona State University. And he told me a similar story somewhere back in, I guess it was the Minnesota area. I may be incorrect, but I remember someone else trying this effort. I'm not sure that it was as successful as yours. So I really want to commend you, because I just want to add that what you're also doing is creating professional preparation. You're helping them to understand, how are you to, in terms of your personal look, how are you to present yourself when you go for a job interview? It is so amazing, because as a senior, I put myself as a senior, God, when I went to college, I would have loved to have had all these support structures. I had none of them. I mean, it was life was life was a lot harder in those days.
Yeah.
Having said that, what? Can you tell me what are some of your most significant writing accomplishments?
Yeah, they link back to op-eds that I've written in support of community colleges offering bachelor's degrees and holding the CSU, mainly. The UCs really haven't fought, but the CSU is accountable to the hypocrisy that goes alongside of them fighting the UCs to have doctorates and then trying to prevent the community colleges from having a bachelor's degree. So presenting the data, like particularly with the nursing matter, where community colleges educate the majority of nurses in the state of California, and particularly if you start looking at the number of Black, Latino, Filipino nurses in the state, community colleges are the place that these students are gaining access. So they're not attending CSUs or UCs to go to nursing school. They're largely attending community colleges. So putting out data that shows the role that DEI plays, their DEI is under the attack in places like Florida, Texas, North Carolina with the current administration. And so using data to inform the community about why is it important that if you go to the hospital and you speak another language or you belong to another culture, that you have access to a nurse who understands your background, because that's as much part of your health in the healing process as actually physically going to the doctor. I've talked openly and written articles openly about the role that mental health has played in my life, particularly because a lot of Black folks don't like to utilize mental health services. Very fortunate to have a college where we actually have Black mental health professionals that we embed into the classrooms. We don't wait for these students to go get mental health. We take the mental health to them. And so a lot of my writings have been and are linked to the interventions that I've talked about, so that we can showcase the work that needs to be done to help the underprivileged, the underserved, the deserved students who we provide education for to be able to access the middle class and beyond.
Can I ask you a question? Have you ever thought, and thank you for that prior answer, have you ever thought that a CTE from a career standpoint is a doctorate? A CTE accomplishment. While I'm saying that, it's because generally the goal of a doctorate is to culminate your learning and to give you the research skills to know how to understand why something exists. And if you think in terms of a person wanting to become, let's say, a refrigerator repairman, hypothetically, if they obtain a wonderful associate's degree and a certificate, in reality for their profession, they've now created why it exists and understand why it exists. So from a career standpoint, maybe not from an academic standpoint, I've always looked at CTE degrees as sort of career doctorates for, I don't want to use the word laypersons, but for I would say practitioners, exactly. People that are not in the academia.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and I see how you're even struggling to put it together, and many of us do. And I'll just give an example of this. At the local high school, Lincoln High School, predominantly black high school in San Diego, we started Workforce Wednesdays. And the reason why we started that is even the counselors and the teachers at the high school have a challenge understanding that trade school or career technical education is academic. It's more about being a practitioner versus theory based. And that's really where we're going after these bachelor's degrees. So haven't gotten to the doctors yet, but certainly to be able to offer, quantify, and qualify the need for someone in heating and air conditioning or electronics or any of these careers that many of our community colleges offer, to have a bachelor's degree to coincide with a lot of these careers are going to allow folks to go into business for themselves, which means they're going to employ other people. And secondly, if you look at the career earnings for some of these things, we have a lineman program with SDG&E. We know that they don't get on the poles anymore. Most of this stuff is underground. But these folks, it's an apprenticeship program. They're making $80,000 a year the 4 years of the apprenticeship program. The first year out of the apprenticeship program, the base pay is $150,000. With overtime, they're earning $250,000. So I absolutely get your point and advocate for them. Matter of fact, we have one of the only apprenticeship programs in the nation with the local Black Contractors Association, the Carpentries Union. We just had our graduating class just last week. I gave the speech, and the basis of my speech was the great debate between Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, which is rooted in your question also, right? With Du Bois being the person who helped develop the NAACP, the first Black person to graduate from Harvard, with Booker T. Well, both Booker T and Du Bois were educated at HBCUs, but Booker T going on to help develop Tuskegee, which initially Tuskegee was based on the trades and the careers, and it starts to unravel this debate about either the talented 10th being educated or going into careers. And the answer is really, Sylvester, you need both. You need both. You need people to go the traditional route, and you need people to work with their hands. Because I don't know about you, but I had my plumbing go out in my house on a Friday after 5 o'clock. The plumber was there for 30 minutes. I had to write a check for $500. If this whole president thing doesn't go.
That's right.
Plumbing school.
That's right. You know what? I know you've talked about the wonderful support that you received as a man of color from various persons, but can you talk about challenges holistically that you feel that sometimes men of color in higher education receive? Now, I believe that part of this is just my theory, that part of your success has been your wonderful learning personality to want to learn, and to your respectful personality. Because when I met you years ago, and I remember having some conversations after we kind of reconnected, and you always struck me as a person who was very palatable but flexible in their thinking. And so that does make your professional life a lot easier sometimes. But historically, you also hear about all the challenges that generally men of color face in higher education. Can you just talk about that just slightly in a sense?
Yeah, as I was going on my 5 interviews for my very first job at UC Davis, when I got to the 5th and final interview, it was with this woman who acknowledge Leslie Campbell, but also with the director, who was a white male. I remember very vividly before the interview started, he looked at me, and I don't even remember his name at this point, but he was very respectful. Gary, I can't remember his last name. First name was Gary, and he had his doctorate. He was the director of admissions and significantly older than me. He must have been in his latter 50s, early 60s, and here I was, a 21, 22 year old. But he looked at me, Sylvester, and he said, "I don't know why you're here, but we'll go ahead and go with the interview." And I looked at him and said, "I'm here because I'm the best candidate for this position." That comes from mentorship. Fortunately, prior to that interview, I had a mentor, another Black woman, who looked at me and said, "Ricky, when you go in that interview, you say you know how to do everything. You don't ever say what you don't know how to do. And then it's up to you to go figure out how to do it." And that's how I've lived my life. And to your point, it has been about learning. And let me also say, I also have to give credit because some of my best mentors have not been Black. I've been mentored from non-Black folks. So people have poured into me, but I've been opening to listening. I've been opening to learning. And I see so many of our young folks, because they have access to Google and information that we never dreamed of, but they don't know application. And so I believe in the book Outliers, where it talks about mastery, taking you learning something for 10,000 hours. If you convert that to years, it's like 4.8 years. So many people want to be a president or a vice president, but they don't want to put in the work. You've heard me reference the work. The one thing that people, whether they like me or not, what they will not say is that I don't know what I'm talking about, and they will not say that I'm not about this work. They will say Ricky is about his business of changing the life of these students by any means necessary, and that includes building collaborations and partnerships with people who don't agree with me. And I guess I'll end my answer on that note. I tend to run toward the fire. I don't shy away from people who disagree with me or who don't like me. The power of taking them out to lunch and listening, because when you build partnerships and relationships with people who are different than you, what you do is raise eyebrows to everybody, like, "Oh, he's over there speaking to that problem faculty." Well, you meet with the faculty member and you find out they just never was heard. Where can we find common ground? One of the best classes I took in my doctorate program, and I didn't think it was the best at the time, was mediation. I thought of mediation as something you just did with the law field. But as a president, I'm very often mediating. Like, is there a win-win? And then, and I know I said it a couple times. Here's the last thing I'll say. Sometimes you got to lose. Some people don't know how to lose. Some people don't know how to give something up. Sometimes you got to lose to win.
That's right. In teaching people how to sing, I always tell people you have to lose control to gain support. You have to lose control to gain support. And that kind of re-emphasizes what you just said about how you have to lose, because it is through the loss that you learn more about how to proceed going forward. Having said that, we have just about one or two more questions. What community work have you accomplished for the improvement of the protected classes with respect to the current DEI movement? And that's a big one, because this, on the West Coast, there's a large concept that, and notice I said the word concept, because I'm not sure it is real here as well, but there's a large concept that we support diversity, equity, and inclusion, as opposed to in some of the southern states, where many of the political structures support more equality because they feel that the DEI movement have a political agenda.
Yeah, so I've always been invested in the community. It could be serving on the board of the local Jackie Robinson YMCA, the United Way, and a host of organizations. But the one that I'll focus my answer on will be my work with Ammen, which is an organization that seeks to increase the success of Black male community college students and the professional development of Black males who work in the community college system. I believe we're going on our 18th or 19th year of offering a conference. I believe we, according to my math, have taken over 700 people to Africa, Ghana specifically, and other countries in Africa, largely Black males. But 4 years ago, we started a conference in Ghana. We've purchased some land in Ghana, building a retreat center there. We now have close to or over 30 chapters of Amend at various community colleges throughout the state. We just received a grant to take Amend national. And it really, again, centers on some of the things I've been saying throughout this interview. It centers on mentoring first colleagues. It was members of Amend, Daryl Foster, and others, Herb English, who helped me finish my doctorate because they already had theirs, but also showed me how to be a father, how to be a husband, how to be a leader. And so that is the work that fulfills my soul. That is the work that is an obligation to pay back for those who helped me. And it brings me great reward to spend a lot of my time away from my family, helping to mentor other Black men who come from similar backgrounds that I do in my authentic self, so that they could see that they could have swag and academics at the same time.
That's right.
And we know that's not always been the case, Professor Henderson, that you could be your authentic self and have a doctorate and be a professor and be a president. And so we're just seeing the results of this, where many of our students are starting to finish with their master's and their doctorate, and they're coming back and saying it was Amend that gave me the faith and the courage that I could be my authentic self and continue this education.
That is where we reconnected at the Amend conference.
Absolutely.
The Amend conference is
yesterday.
A wonderful conference, and I love and respect each of you in there. I'm especially very fond of Dr. Edward Bush, Darrell Foster, and I'm very, very, very close to them, as well as Byron Breland. I like to yell at Byron more because I'm going to say this on this podcast. I told him one day he needs to buy me some fine shoes for being nice to him, and I'm still waiting for my shoes.
That's right.
But yeah, so I want to, before I get to my last question, what a delightful professional man that you are, and what a wonderful leader you have become for not just your college, but serving as an example and a stellar example of what an African American male or a student or even a female student and student in general can achieve through hard work and a positive outlook on life. Before I ask my final question, I want to ask you this. Could you share any other thoughts and ideas you would like to communicate?
You know, the answer to most of our problems is in a book. And growing up, I was more of a math person and didn't really like to read, and was very fortunate to have a grandmother who realized I didn't like to read. And so she found an encyclopedia of fishing. You know, when I'm not being a college president or being a father or a husband, I love to go fishing. You got to have an outlet. You know, I love to travel. My education has taken me places that I never dreamed I would be able to go. And so my message is that there's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but people have to be willing to endure to the end. You know, I wanted to give up, but very fortunate to have had mentors who kept me focused. And as the song go, and you'll know this song, you know, when you fall down, you got to get back up.
That's right.
And so very often people want to stay down, and, you know, we all battle with depression. We all battle with, are we the right one for the job? You've got to, I mean, and these are things we know. We've got to surround yourself with positive people. You got to surround yourself with people who are doing better than you, or people who are moving in the same direction as you are. And so as I look back, and it seems like I was 19 just the other day meeting you at UC Berkeley, but the reality is I'm about 6 years away from vacation, hence me having these glasses on. I can't see like I used to. And so we have an obligation to train the next generation. You invested in me and several of my colleagues that you mentioned, including my best friend who's doing amazing work as well. And so that places an obligation on us, those of us that are now, Professor Henderson, I looked up and I'm starting to get to elder age now. And I
can tell you about that.
And so the other thing I would like to say is that, I'm committed to this work and also mentoring other people so that when I leave this work in good hands.
Well, on behalf of this national podcast that is titled Professor for Life Incorporated, of which we interview professors and administrators and what have you, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to allow me to share your story and journey with the world and the larger community. Our podcast reaches all over the globe, as far as India, all over the world. And so I want to thank you for taking your time. I wish you and your lovely family a wonderful, happy Thanksgiving. And hopefully we'll be able to communicate very soon. You take care of yourself.
It's always a pleasure.
And have a pleasant day. Thank you. God bless you. Bye-bye now.
Likewise.